Welcome to the Lifestyle Evolution Podcast. I am your host, Joshua Laycock. I've been thinking a lot about the notion of resonance lately. You ever have this feeling when someone talks to you about an idea or a concept, or you hear a quote or whatever, and it just sits heavy with you, right? And you're like, yeah, tell me more about that. Let me just let that sink in. I stumbled on this idea of resonance, and I thought, I need more of that in my world. That sums up what I'm working towards. And what are we talking about, right? Really, it's living life in harmony, in tune with your surroundings, with the people and the environment, not in conflict with all the time. You ever tune a guitar or something, and as you're trying to tune it, it just doesn't feel right, right? It's warbly and it vibrates and it's actually in the literal sense, it's repulsive. It creates like a shock wave that pushes you away. And then when you get the tuning just right, and it's fine tuning often. It sounds beautiful and it invites you in and it's warm and it reverberates and it lasts. It works together rather than fights against. And I realized when I was reading about this concept, both sort of social resonance and scientific, and it's like, this is what I want more of. That feeling of like, oh yeah, that's right. This feels good. And for me, it really is at the heart of what I'm seeing with all of my clients and looking in the world. And I'm really at the risk of becoming almost like a social recluse. I know that sounds kind of counterproductive given what I'm working on and who I'm trying to be, but you know, sitting out in the world, particularly online, and we hear this constant conflict, perpetual state of you're wrong. I'm right. You're stupid. What's wrong with you? How dare you? You're doing it wrong. I don't like that. Like it's constant. And I see so many people that are walking through this world in this constant state of conflict, which is like the anti-resonance. But what's really ironic about this is that I find for those who live in this constant state of conflict and their nervous system is hyper aroused and they're constantly seeking conflict and they're in their fight flight mechanisms. They struggle with actually having challenging conversations, with establishing boundaries, which are a lot of when you talk to people who are in this state, to them, that is the ultimate state of conflict. Having a difficult conversation with your spouse, establishing boundaries at work, articulating your desires and your wants, that feels like conflict, but it's not. I think because they're so overwhelmed with the day-to-day conflict that is created in their world, they're exhausted. And it's so easier to kind of have this repulsive conflict out there, wherever that is, than to really open up and risk sharing a part of you that's real. Now, what does that conflict tell me? That does actually share something that's very real, right? There's pain, there's trauma, there's distrust, there's a lot that is through the subtext of that conflict. And I want to be really clear when we talk about this. I don't say that with judgment. There was a time in my life that I did, but as I grow and evolve and learn more about human nature and what underpins our behaviors, I realize that that state of constant conflict, or at least the perception of constant conflict, and that triggers us into this fight mode or flight or freeze. right? That's beyond a conscious decision. That's something that's happened to us. So as I walk through this conversation today, I want to be really clear that I'm not judging. However, our past does define who we are in this exact moment, right now, the fleeting moment of this moment. I do believe that we are all influenced entirely by the entirety and the fulsomeness of everything that has happened to us in our world. All of it. Every little interaction influences how we show up in this moment. But that doesn't mean that we get a pass. It doesn't mean that it is an excuse or validation for continuing to be in this state. As adults, we have to do the work. Doesn't mean it's easy. Yes, easier said than done. For some people, they have to walk a more challenging path than others. But it's important to recognize that a reason is not an excuse. And depending on where you're at in your journey, and we'll talk a little bit about this today, your journey may start with therapy or medicine, whether that's a chemical medicine or whether that's like pharmacology or whether it's psychedelic, always under the care of a professional. I am not a professional in either of those spaces. But if you're sitting in therapy, which I am a professional, or if you're looking for a medicinal solution, not a professional, or maybe it's just pulling yourself in community with other men or having someone guide you, like a coach or a leader or a fellow traveler on this path with you. Really, what is our mission? Our mission is not so much to become something else, but actually to move closer to our true nature, to unlearn, to let go, and to set down a lot of the things that influence and that have influenced us in the past so that we can then start to live life in harmony, in resonance with those around us. So, how do we start that journey? One of the things that I often talk about with my clients is that I believe life is like a river. It's a great analogy for what we're doing. It's not perfect, but it's pretty darn good. And I think one of the core concepts of navigating a river is knowing where the riverbanks are, the edges. For me, the edges are defined by our personal values and by our ethics, by the things that guide us. When we fall out of this sort of slipstream of life, it's usually when we've compromised our values and our ethics. And I don't know how many people actually sit down outside of the religious community, which I'll say, whether you agree with their positions or not, have done a pretty good job of defining their values and their ethics. Again, not necessarily saying they've come to the right conclusion. Who am I to judge? But there aren't a lot of communities that sit down and go, what do we think is good? What do we think is right? Right. And that's a tough conversation depending on what sort of stage you stand on. But I think the first step for a lot of people who are struggling or who aren't where they want to be or often find themselves in a place where like, how the hell did I get here again? Why did I keep making that same mistake? Is to reflect on those values and the ethics that we actually hold dear. And again, not those that we think should, although when it comes to stuff like values and ethics, being influenced by others is not a bad thing necessarily. But to reflect on those and to recognize these are the boundaries that in the sober light of day I would like to not cross. Right? This is the statement I do with a lot of my clients. What kind of a man do you want to be? I'm the kind of man who dot dot dot. When we're not in it, when we're not in the firefight of life, when we're not in the rapids, struggling, what are the non-negotiables? And write them down. Now, our values and our ethics are absolutely influenced by other people. One of the pieces of work that we do in therapy a lot is actually going back and looking at someone's past with curiosity and finding out, what did your life teach you? What did the people in your world, what did the experiences that you've had, what did they teach you? If you've got that running narrative that like, I'm not good enough, I'm never going to survive, no one's going to love me, or if I even risk making other people unhappy, no one's going to love me, those kind of things. Those are actually a part of your core narrative of your values and your beliefs. And they're not helpful. I don't want to say they're not true because that, again, now, do I believe that they're true? No. But for you, are they? Probably in the moment. And if you're working with those running narratives of like, I'm always a failure, no one's going to love me, you know, I deserve the bad things that happen to me, that kind of narrative, that's a sit down with a therapist and work through that stuff and understand the origin of that and to work to unwind it. And as you do, we can replace those with better values and stronger ethics. It's things like I'm going to be a man of integrity. I'm going to honor my commitments. I'm going to honor the people in my world. I'm going to do what I say I'm going to do. I'm not going to do the things that I said I'm not going to do. I'm going to follow through. I'm going to be dependable. I'm going to be reliable. I remember early in my master's program, we took a course on ethics and we started talking about it and the prof challenged us. And it was about, what are your personal ethics? And a lot of people were saying like, I don't understand why we need a code of conduct to say things like you can't have inappropriate sexual relations with your clients. Why do we need to put that into words? It's so self-evident. Why do we need to define what is right and wrong? We should know. Yet if that were true, whether in the therapeutic world or just out in the general population, if that were true, if these ethics were so obvious, why do so many people violate them? Why do so many people find themselves on the other side of right and wrong? I can think of so many times that I see a politician, let's say. Doesn't matter which side you're on, if you're on a side at all, right, left, center, doesn't matter. But how many times have we seen someone do something that is to us such an obvious conflict of interest or such an obviously inappropriate course of action. And you wonder, like, you didn't stop to think if that was the right thing to do. I'm guessing those people, and look, we all make mistakes. We do. But I'm guessing those people hadn't sat down and really clearly thought about what kind of a man do I want to be? What are the kind of things that can pull me from the path? What are my temptations? What are my siren songs that, if confronted with them, I better pay attention? Because part of defining our own personal values and our own personal ethics is knowing our own weaknesses and exploring why those are our weaknesses. Maybe your weakness is food. Maybe it's your phone and doom scrolling. Maybe it's anger. Maybe it's sex or porn, drugs, alcohol, right? Apathy. What is likely going to pull us from our path? And recognizing those things and defining them as this is what I'm going to do. This is the line beyond which I will not cross. And if nothing else from this podcast, I encourage you to look at your world and to define and identify your weaknesses, your vulnerabilities, and how those align with your personal values and your ethics. Right? I am a man of integrity. I am a man who does what he said he's going to do. I am a man who is reliable. I'm a man who takes care of myself. I'm a father. I'm a husband. I'm a son. I'm an employee. I'm an employer. Like, who are you? And there are a lot of ways that you can go about this practice. The first thing I'd urge you to look into, and my friend Trevor Boehm often talks about this, and I agree 100%, is looking at where are you out of integrity? Because nothing makes us feel worse, I think, than when we are out of integrity with ourselves. Did you say you were going to do something and you didn't do it? Or did you say you weren't going to do something, but you did it anyway? Kicking the crap out of yourself isn't doing the work. Making yourself feel like shit and telling yourself you're garbage, that's not doing the work. It's the easy way out. It really is, unfortunately. It's like it makes you feel good in the moment, but it doesn't accomplish anything. Well, it does actually, it tears you down, and it makes you more likely to transgress in the same way. You'll actually get addicted to that process of like expectation. I let myself down. I make myself feel like a piece of shit. And then I can kind of feel good about myself because I'm not feeling good about the way I acted. So then I'm kind of got this loop, and it's exhausting and it accomplishes nothing. Evolution is transcending that loop and actually adjusting your behavior, not with perfection, but with progress. Where are you out of integrity? That absence of integrity is like rot. We all have places in our lives that we are not in integrity, including yours truly. We all do. So there are lots of exercises that you can do, but the first thing I think we should all be doing is define our ethics and our values. What kind of a man am I going to be? And then as we start to navigate this river of life, I think we also need to realize, what are we hanging on to? What are the heavy things in our world that are sinking us? Is there anger? Is there people that we need to forgive? Do we need to forgive ourselves? Are we clinging on to some societally defined version of who I should be? I'm not worthy of happiness unless I'm rich. No one's going to find me physically attractive unless I have 8% body fat and I'm shredded. There's parts of my body I don't like. There's parts of my mind I don't like. People are going to see through everything. You can see how these are connected to these values, these core thoughts, right? But the more we hang on to this stuff, it's heavy. It weighs us down. And it is no wonder that so many of us are drowning in this world, desperately clinging to the rocks and the bricks that are dragging us to the bottom, wondering why I'm not thriving. I said this before, life is not so much about becoming something else, but allowing yourself to move closer to who you really are. And in many ways, that is about shedding the crap that we carry with us each and every day, the shoulds of the world. How many times do you say, I need to do something, I need to be this person, or I need to accomplish this thing? Need. There are actually very few things in our life that we need to do. There are. We need to eat. We need to drink water. We need to sleep. We need to have shelter and we need to be cared for. Like we need love. And I'm sure I'm missing something, but almost everything else is a luxury from a certain perspective. I had a client a while ago, had a young family, and was just crushed or feeling crushed by the financial expectations of his life. And it was brutal, and he was like, I got car payments and I got mortgage and all the bills and all these things. It was a lot. And they did well for themselves. And he said to me one day, we made a big decision. He said, we're selling our house. We're moving into an apartment. We're going to get rid of one car and we're just going to massively downsize because we realized like we don't need all this stuff. And they did. And they were prepared to sacrifice the status of owning a big house. They were prepared to sacrifice the luxury of having all this extra space. And they downsized and they minimized their financial burden substantially. Now, I'm not saying go sell your stuff, but as I said that, I can almost guarantee you that you were thinking there's no way. There's no way. There's no way I would do that. And I guess to say that's okay, but recognize that that's a choice. That's a want. It is not a need. We don't need a big house. We don't need multiple vehicles. Yes, we do. My kids are in 1,000 sports. Well, maybe your kids don't need to be in 1,000 sports, right? Maybe they don't have to be going in 1,200 directions. Like the point that I'm trying to get to is recognize that we are holding on to a lot of stuff. And this is the stuff I'm talking about. This perceived need of having a big house, multiple cars, fancy clothes, watches, computers, tech, the newest phone, being on social media, the everything that we put out into the world that a lot of us consider a need. They're not. They're wants. So you have some choices here. You can choose to put down the burden of these things and decide to say, I get to do these things. I'm choosing to do these things. And sometimes that simple mindset shift from have to get to is enough to lessen the weight with knowledge that, you can always back off. And look, there are some people who are living a very heavy life. Finding things to put down can be tricky. But I do think that most of the heavy things that we carry, we actually carry in our chest, in our mind. The anger, the frustration, the how dare they, the people who wronged us. Maybe it's your parents, maybe it's a sibling, maybe it's a boss. What are you carrying? I loved this quote from a therapist I have a lot of respect and time for, named Michael Gay. He had said, some things in life are too heavy to put down by yourself. That's where community comes into play. That's where sitting shoulder to shoulder with a bunch of brothers and saying, I'm feeling this. Can you guys help me put this down? Can you guide me? Can you help me see that I'm still going to be a man, even though I no longer chase the big paycheck or the big house or the big car? Because what do we seek in relationship? We seek to know that we're safe and that we're important. You're not important because of how much money you make or because of how you look. You're important because you're important. So, an important element of this evolution journey is also seeing what am I hanging on to? And what do I need to let go of? I remember, and yeah, it's a little Napoleon Dynamite of me, but I remember telling stories about playing football in high school, and they were good times. But I thought, my God, that's like 25 years ago, you know, the remember whens, the oh, I could have beens. You gotta let that go. Even for me, when I joined the military in 2002-ish, and I blew my back out in basic training, unfortunately. And I couldn't get a clean bill of health from any of the doctors, so I was returned to my unit, and because I couldn't get a clean bill of health, I was discharged on a medical discharge, and it not being able to serve, but also having failed the physical and mental rigors of basic training, um, it really bothered me for a long time. It was it was probably one of the most potent things weighing on me in terms of that I felt like a failure, that I was not worthy or capable of doing important things. And it took me a long time to let that go. To say, no, okay. There are things you probably could have done differently, should have done differently. Or rather, I would have liked to have done things differently. I would have been in better shape. I would have known what it was like to do physical exercise with all this weight on my back. There are things that I should have prepared for. But rather than lamenting past failures and allowing them to act as some sort of a personal judgment on myself. I just chose to learn from it and be prepared for the next challenge. I needed to let that go. I carried that for a long time. My bad back has cost me a lot of things that I really wanted, but it has also brought me down this path. My kids are upstairs sleeping. My wife is upstairs sleeping. It's early morning. My life is good. My dogs are laying right there. I can hear the birds outside. I get to have an impact on people's lives. My life is pretty damn good because of those past events that have influenced me and because of my ability to let certain things go that I was hanging on to. One of the things about the river analogy, pardon me, one of the things about the river analogy that trips people up is like, does that mean that I have to go in the direction of the river? Does that mean that my life is predetermined, predestined, and I'm just along for the ride? And this is where our river is a little different. No, I don't think that our life is predestined. I just don't. I think that we are forced to ride the rapids and the currents that pull us. But I do think that we get a say in our end game. And rivers don't always flow north-south. A lot of people think they do. That's not true. Rivers flow downhill. They're pulled by gravity. And if you've heard me talk about vision and planning a fulfilled life, you will know that I talk at length about gravity. But focusing on where you want to go and why you want to go there and sitting in that and marinating in the glory of what you're going to accomplish will create a gravity that will pull you forward and will allow you to break free from the gravity of the past, the emotional traumas, the could have beens, the should haves that are emotionally potent and create gravity. If you don't live life with intention and you merely allow past experiences to influence who you are without regard for what kind of a person you want to be and where you want to go, then yes, that gravity will pull your river of life in that direction and you will go in that direction. And chances are good, many of us are in that position. This is what a lot of guys talk about, like they're just living life on autopilot. They're just they're just going through the motions, when in fact, really what you're doing is you're being ripped through the rapids. You're barely keeping your head above the water. And you might not know where you're headed. I do. You're headed to the direction that is influenced purely by the traumas and by the influences of your past. Where that ultimately takes you, damned if I know, but it sure as hell isn't going to be where you want to go. So as you do the work, as you connect with your vision, as you identify what things in life are important to you and what you get to do, which burdens are you going to choose to take on to live a noble life, you influence the end. You influence the outcome. You influence where that river takes you. And the stronger your connection to your vision and the more robust and clearly defined your values and your ethics, the riverbanks become, then the more potently you move towards that goal and the more likely you are to stay on that path. This is the work that men need to do so that you can learn to live in harmony with your world so that you can have a potent influence over where you're going and how you're going to get there and what kind of a man shows up at the end. Else you're just going to get thrown around, pounded on the rocks, and dumped into some basin at the end of the river that means nothing. You know, constantly fighting. We're constantly struggling against the current because something inside of us knows that this direction is not where I want to go. I don't want to be going in this direction, but I don't know how to get out of here. I don't know where the edges are. I'm being dragged down by the crap that I can't put down. And it is frightening. It is claustrophobic. I've been there. I think everybody has at some point. Sometimes we can get out on our own, sheer brute force from time to time, but often what you need is a hand for someone to reach in and grab you, either by the hand or by the scruff of the neck, and pull you out onto the shore and say, brother, what are you doing in there? That's not your path. You weren't meant to be in that water. Let me help you find your river. Let me help you define. You will define your river. Let me help you on that process. Discover what kind of a man you're meant to be. Start living in integrity. Start having compassion for yourself. And start shedding all of the things that are not you, are not your true essence. Learn to put it down. Learn when to ask for help. Get rid of the porn. Get rid of the booze. Get rid of the drugs. Get rid of the laziness and the slothfulness. Get rid of all of the things that are standing in between you and where you want to be. Learn to connect. Learn to have healthy conflict. Learn to have boundaries. And start living in harmony, in resonance with the world. I don't know if this resonated with you, but most of the men that approach me, I see them in this river, scared, sometimes not even aware of where they are. And that's why I've chosen this path, and that's why I'm building the Lifestyle Evolution Project, because you are a project, your work. So I would ask you to share this with anybody that may need to hear this. If you know someone who's in that river, maybe handing them this podcast is your way of shoving your hand in the river and dragging them out and saying, come on, please pay attention. There are better things in store for you than this. I hope that this connects with you. I'd love to have you in our group. And if you are struggling, I need you to know that there is another path and that I don't believe anyone is predestined to suffer, that anyone is predestined to be thrown around like a rag doll by life. But we do have to make a conscious decision. Perhaps this is your first step. Have a great rest of your day.